How Do I Music? A podcast by Well Nice Music.
This grassroots community grew up to try and save the station. And don't forget they were trying to save Asian Network at the same time.
Sure.
There was these two sort of twin campaigns. And obviously we did join in with them. You know, there was this kind of, it's like almost like passing them intelligence sort of thing. Like, you know, I was there at the protests outside Broadcasting House with them, but we couldn't seem to be leading this. But it was remarkable, you know, it was such...
Hello and welcome to How Do I Music, your new favourite podcast, hopefully. We are a podcast that talks about the music industry and hopefully makes it not boring. This episode is with Tom Whalley. What a legend of the game. He is a producer for Huey Morgan on BBC Six Music, but also has done a load of other shows as well. Keen podcaster as well. Sounds Good, right? His podcast company, and they do some amazing work, so do check them out. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the conversation we had. We do nerd out a lot about sound design and podcasting in general. He even passed on some tips to myself, which I managed to squeeze into this edit. So if you've got eagle ears, the equivalent of that, whatever that is or similar, do see what you can hear, because he recommends something and it's in the podcast. So if you're good at that, then let me know and let us know on socials and get in touch and all that stuff. Anyway, I'm not going to waste any more time. Thanks for tuning in. This is our conversation. So we're here with Tom Whalley. Thanks for coming on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Listen, I'm good. This is probably the most I've talked in a long time. I'm normally just on my own in the studio. So it's funny, weird, like when I do these sorts of things and have a day where I'm having lots of conversations, that I know I'm going to pay for it, like either tomorrow or next week. Because I am naturally introverted. I'm good at talking to people, but my natural nature is I'm an introvert, and I'll definitely like. Next week, I'll definitely withdraw into my shell. No doubt. No doubt.
You picked the wrong industry for that, though. No, it's like you're getting chatted by radio pluggers wanting something from you every day. No,
I used to find that I did when I used to work in the Six Music office back in the day, and the pluggers could just walk in and talk to you. Like in those days, I didn't really understand my creative process or my personality as well as I do now. And it'd be great. I'd have a laugh with these people. I made some really good friends out of it. But it's obviously did sort of disrupt work, and it did leave me absolutely drained. You know, like I know I'm much better when I'm like, okay, I'm in my little box here, my little studio, and I've got no calls for a day. Just crack on. Like that's me. You know. So yeah.
We'll start with the quick fire round and then we'll go more into what your day-to-day is. So, first of all, name and occupation. Go.
Name and occupation. So, I'm Tom Whalley. I am a sound designer and audio producer. Yeah, I change it every time. I'll change it.
Last time music moved you, made you cry, dance, or something in between?
Listen, any piece of... My daughter started school today, so...
wow.
Just her voice singing a song when she comes home is going to make me cry. So it's maybe not the last time, maybe the next time.
The next time. All right, that.
I am very emotional. Like music gets me though. Still.
What about all-time favourite album? Is that too tough?
Do you know what? It's probably not. It's probably American football.
Yeah,
maybe.
Class. Nice.
I don't, and that's not really on brand for me, but I fucking love that record. Used to be the Soft Bulletin.
Yeah.
Flaming Lips. Probably would have said it one time. They're two I would have definitely said. Yeah.
Last song you listened to?
The last song I listened to, I can tell you this because I'm just building the Huey Show. I listened to a track called, it's going in the show, Ward to Ward by Bronze, Silver and Brass. It's on Timian Records.
Brilliant. Okay. And explain what you do in 3 words.
Make people... Oh, this is going to be 4. Make people sound good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll take it. I thought you were going to say make people happy.
I don't do that.
That's not my job.
That's no way. I'll leave that to the professionals.
So go on. Let's dig into your background. How did you get into radio production, what you do for BBC Six Music and the BBC Radio 4 as a whole, did you always want to do this?
Yes.
What was the journey leading to this point?
So when I was about 17 or 18, to be honest, I was a bit lost. I grew up in Nottingham. I'm back in Nottingham, living there now, right? And like music was my thing. I loved music, but I wasn't good enough. My band was never going to do anything. I was never that good a musician. But obviously, just love music, and radio was a huge part of it. I listened to the radio all the time. I didn't listen to John Peel like everyone my age will say.
Yeah.
My John Peel was Mark and Lard, or
Right, okay.
even Steve Lamac's Evening Session. They were really important things for me, and I just thought I want to do that. I've always found a bit of a romance in radio, and even when I see it in films like in The Warriors, or there used to be a show called Northern Exposure. I can remember that, like set in like Alaska, and just one character was the local radio guy, and he's just on his own in a room playing records, telling stories.
Yeah,
and there's a real romance to it. So I wanted to do it. The way I got in was about 18, 19, left school, left college. I was supposed to go and do a law degree, and I just didn't want to.
Oh wow!
No intention of going. Didn't go. And then it's like, well, what do I do? I want to do radio, but I'm in the regions, like, and I'm from a working class family. Like, how do you even get in there? What do you do? And then, luckily for me, someone on my street, his marriage broke down, and then he met his new partner, and she sort of had an admin secretarial role at Radio Nottingham. She got me through the door, and through that, I met this wonderful guy called Dean Jackson, who is still doing BBC Introducing in the East Midlands. Has that show he does called The Beat. It's been going for probably 30 years now, and it's thrived off just having young people come through, pretty much unpaid, but just become part of the show and just help out. And I became one of those people, and I was like, right, I want to. And after that, I did that a long time, and
we're talking tea or coffees, or did you
tea coffee, a bit of editing, bit of on-air stuff, actually quite a lot of on-air, just chat, and then also like just sending out the prizes at the end of the night and things like that, printing calls out, printing messages out and stuff, putting callers through, and then that got me prepared for doing that job on Radio Nottingham, just in general, as like a phone editor, a kind of producery type person, and gradually built up my work there and got a job there. But I wanted to go to Six Music. I wanted to do the London thing, but I was so scared, and I value an income, probably because of sort of coming from working class roots and stuff. Like, I was never going to be able to just go to London and freelance. So I wouldn't have understood it.
Were you scared in an imposter syndrome kind of way?
Imposter syndrome, but like I didn't have any information. It seems like it's expensive. It's
Oh, of course, it's make or break. It feels like the jump. Yeah.
Didn't know the freelancers could make a living that sort of way. And once I got down to London, I eventually got a job at Six Music, only for a temporary one for a year.
Yeah.
And it took me ages to get that, and that was like, okay, now I can move to London because I have a job, and I did. And then that contract ended, and luckily enough, just as that contract, I'd been producing Lauren Laverne and Tom Robinson, but Lauren Laverne's show Huey would step in for that for a really long time, and that's how I met Huey. And then, just as I was about to lose my contract and have to go back to Nottingham to my other job, the Huey job came up as a freelancer, and I got it. I took it, and I don't want to leave the BBC fully, so I kept a staff job in Nottingham, and I was travelling back, and eventually that sort of just became untenable, and I sacked it off, and then I just did Huey, and then realised that this world of freelancing around the BBC in London, like it was huge. It was enough to pay my rent in those days. So that was it, that, and then that was my Huey, and the rest of the freelance stuff was my career, and for a long time, and just it all revolved around live radio, mostly music radio, and that was it.
With the Huey Show, it's become one of the biggest shows on Six now. The biggest.
Well, I'll caveat that, right?
Go.
So the way the figures work out is that Lauren, Steve, Mary, all these weekly shows, 5-day-a-week shows, they get more, but I think the way the audience is measured is cumulative. So how many people listen across a week? A single point, the biggest audience is listening to Huey. It didn't used to be the case. It used to be Keris, and it's still it's very even. But like Huey nudged ahead recently. I don't know if it still is, but so I kind of say,
how competitive are you with the other producers? Do you bring it up to each other, or is it a thing, or no?
Do you know what? I just love it that a show like Huey's and Keris's, at a time of the week which traditionally isn't the biggest show, can thrive. That's what Six Music have allowed those two shows today. You wouldn't necessarily make those shows on paper because it's really hard to translate what they are or why they work. But this is
what I find interesting at the moment. With you was talking about the romance of radio earlier, and I think with my age group, so I'm 28 and below, I think we're getting a lot of people now finding ways that they want to have real curators again and have people recommend them music that's not an algorithm, that's not just from Spotify's Discover Weekly or whatever it may be. And I think that it's going the other way again. I feel that you're getting a lot of people feel like they need curation or human input into their taste rather than it just being based on what is algorithmic.
Your generation is interesting though, because there's been a lot of, I'm really interested in lost media and stuff, lost records that haven't been digitized or can't be attributed to people. And I think your generation has had this sort of weird fascination, almost like a nostalgia for something they didn't know, like this pre-digital sort of thing. And I never really considered that radio might get swept up in that, but I'd love it if it did, younger people, because that's one of the challenges for what we do. Our audience is eventually going to die out. That's what they always tell us, but and also about the algorithm, that's also interesting. So Lorna Clark, who is one of the big bosses at the BBC, sort of runs BBC Pop, I think it is. I probably should also get that title right, but she's basically responsible for all the music stations and all the music on TV as well, all that kind of stuff. But she says things like, she says, your show beats the algorithm, like it breaks the algorithm, and it does, because no sensible algorithm would put together what we do. Ever. I hope it works, and also I hope sometimes it doesn't, and that's fine. It's fine that things don't work. That's human.
The algorithm is great for recommending music that you're already in the ballpark of listening to, but you're never going to get like the pure curation of a good radio team and a good radio show is that you go, I don't have a clue about this genre. This isn't normally my thing. Bam. Oh, now it's my thing. Whereas I don't feel like that. You kind of just stay in your zone when it comes to what you're being recommended algorithmically. So I think there's always going to be a market like that. And I think there's a movement against it at the moment.
I hope so. And if I'm good at this, if I'm good at being a radio producer and a sort of selector, someone who helps pick music and put music in a sort of an order that works. The reason I'm good at that, I think, is because I spent a lot of time DJing before I was doing radio stuff, and a lot of time in record stores, learning from people about their sort of specialist interest, and doing that. I just thought I was dossing about, just what you do, isn't it? But it's I actually realised that that was the most vital piece of learning I did. Learning to how to get into jazz, learning how to be into hip hop, and having these sort of references that from 20 years ago that I can pull out and and join the dots between. So I think if I'm good, honestly, it's all that time when I thought I was wasting time was actually time really well spent.
Well, that's that. If you've managed to be one of the people that make your hobby, what was a hobby, into your living, then that isn't wasted time anymore. But that's the great thing about it. You become an expert in something. It's that whole 10,000 hour, without getting too self-helpy about it. But it is. Right. It's like it's 10,000 hours spent becoming an expert because you're not thinking about becoming an expert. You're just having fun with it.
That's it.
It's like fun.
Yeah, that's it. And that's my only advice to anyone wanting to do it is just I guess just embrace it. And I am. You're right though. I am lucky. The other thing I've got to say, it's hard making a living and doing these things, but I am lucky in what I'm super lucky to do what I do. And I don't know anyone. I'm trying to think who I know who's had such a long-term relationship with one presenter. Like I've done Huey Show for nearly 15 years, me and Huey, right? Which is mad. And maybe it's a total mistake. Like maybe I should have been like trying to climb the corporate ladder, but I love it.
Yeah. And I think also, if you have that relationship with somebody who's sticking around for that long as well, he could have easily gone like, you know what, I want to dip somewhere else. And
he's not even from this country.
Yeah, exactly.
He's American. Like, he could just go home. I'd love to know actually if there's who's out there like has had a longer relationship with the longest producer presenter relationships out there.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. We'll have to find out. We'll go on a search for it.
I always thought someone might write a Guardian article about me. Like if I am the longest serving with one person.
You must know if you're the longest at 6 at the moment then. Or
so I'm definitely not the longest at 6. So I joined 6 just before they threatened to close it. So that was like my
wow. Okay.
I was there when it was tiny, and
so you saved 6, right?
I saved 6.
That's the headline. That's the bit.
I was there when it all kicked off. I was in the room when Tim Davey, told us that he's gonna. These are the reasons for shutting it down.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of skin in the game, so I was working there, but it wasn't my job and hadn't been my job forever. But it was a remarkable time. I'd kind of love to go back to that time and remember it, what happened, and obviously what happened to 6 after, when it sort of rose like this phoenix from the flames and became what it is now. But then there's a lot of people who were there right at the beginning who are still there now. Adam, who's Iggy's producer, has been there forever. Gary, one of the editors there, has been there forever. Jack,
how was the feeling around the place when it was under threat? You had this existential, how everyone's at threat of losing their jobs. What happened between the team at this point? It
was weird because for one, you couldn't be seen to be campaigning to save something because that your employers have told you there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
But there was this kind of strange relationship with this grassroots community grew up to try and save the station. And don't forget, they were trying to save Asian Network at the same time. Sure. There was these two sort of twin campaigns. And obviously we did join in with them. There was this kind of, it's like almost like passing them intelligence sort of thing. I was there at the protests outside Broadcasting House with them, but we couldn't seem to be leading this. But it was remarkable. It was such. Six Music is still a passionate, music-loving place. But when I first joined, because it had grown out of BBC London, and a lot of people had come from BBC London, which was this really formative radio station for a lot of people. Six Music was delightfully eccentric when I joined. It was like being in a record shop. Like it was, went onto that floor, and it was like, there was posters up, there's pictures up, there's records everywhere. People are sharing records and playing CDs in the office. Where I used to sit with a guy called Henry, who's still there. And he was producing, maybe he's producing Freak Zone or something. And we'd have jazz afternoons, on a Friday with just the turntable. And, it was just this and it was, it was dirty and dusty. It was covered with, it was just like your favorite record store, but it was a radio station and impressive. And that was under threat. And so you can imagine what it meant to people. And again, in the BBC, it's like, well, where else do I go to do this?
Yeah, especially in the UK, right? It's like you feel like you're at the top at that point. There's not much room for maneuver.
Nowhere else to sort of express yourself and play music in that way and be with that sort of group of people with, just open ears and open hearts. So it was really yeah, and for me, having just realised my ambition of getting to work there, it's like, oh no, have I done this? Brought my fucking bad luck again. Yes, it was a trip, man. And
so, how did you find out that it was saved? Walk us through that, Dave.
That's a fucking great question. I can't remember. I think it got a vibe that there was a momentum shift. But I can't remember there being there was never this
hooray,
6 Music saved, your hats in the air.
Yeah.
It was that never happened. So I would remember that. it just became apparent that this was really hard to ignore. But I'm reminded of it a lot because Tim Davie is now the boss of the BBC,
right?
And the whole BBC, and he was the guy that sort of, stood in front of me. Like he'd have been a face on my dartboard at that time.
Yeah,
like, he was like the enemy,
Yeah, sure.
Oh, take this thing you love away. So it's never far from my mind, that period, especially because it's in the news quite a lot. So yeah. I'd love to know how we found out. I just want to research. How did I find out? I'd love to know.
So going back to the present, I was going to say, not quite, but how's your current day? Do you go into the office still? Is it one headquarters? You're all working from home? What is it like?
So I was always London based predominantly, and would work in the office. It was the only way to work was kind of in the office. You had to go in and load your music into the system or whatever. And then I started to be more of a freelancer. So I got a Mac and I was like, okay, well, I can do a lot of this stuff not in the office, or if I'm in the office, I can just be working on my own computer. And then, so I was always in and around the office. And don't forget, I was always freelancing. So I was often covering other shows, mostly around the weekends, but I'd do anything. Then the rest of my work started changing about 10 years ago, when I've been in podcasting for 20 years, but about 10 years ago, like the kind of commercial possibilities of podcasting really started to get realized, and I could make another bit of my living from doing that. So again, that sort of flipped this sort of to more sort of remote work and work from home, combined with my BBC stuff. But I was still doing a live show, and then I left London. I had to leave London because, like, you can't. How can you have kids and buy a house and do all those things? Moved to the Peak District to be near Six Music in Salford. I could cycle to Salford. It was great. I was a competitive cyclist at the time. I was living in the Peaks, training really hard, loved it. And again, doing a bit of freelance and being in Salford. And then the pandemic came, and then so me and Huey lives in Bath. So like there was no way we were all traveling into London. It was pretty tricky. So we started pre-recording the show, and around that sort of time, then I didn't go into the office. What I should tell you, actually, while I was living in Glossop, the sacrifice I had to make, Huey was still live from London on a Saturday morning. So I was on the 5:25 a.m. train, just me and Dotun Adebayo from 5 Live. He just finished his overnight shift. He was going home. I was going down to work. I would get up at 3, I'd leave my house at 4 a.m, cycle like 13 miles.
There's no Friday night for you. No Friday beers for you.
None of that. None of that. In the pissing rain a lot of time because it's northwest. Train down to do the show. Back home, and it was worth it for doing a great show and to be able to live the life I was living outside of London. Pandemic stopped. Pandemic changed that.
Of course.
And then pandemic ended. We went back to doing live. And then we sort of pivoted back to doing it the way we'd learned during the pandemic and pre-recording it. And we're quite lucky that we are allowed to record it. So I then moved to Nottingham, and I was traveling to London from Nottingham every weekend. And then we sort of, like I said, pivoted. So now Huey and we've just done it today. We meet virtually online. He's in his studio in Bath. I'm here. We do get together relatively often, but we do the show that way. So yeah, I don't go into a BBC office at all.
It's a different world now, isn't it? Every job.
I'm worried though. I've got to say I'm worried because my backbone of what I've done is live radio. And I've not had that anxiety of live radio for a long time. And I worry that,
I won't be able to do it again. Yeah,
can I do it?
I guess that's it. In anything that's pre-recorded, there's no error. There's no jeopardy whatsoever. Which
and it's just
nice.
you can easily take the station off air completely. It's a real sort of weird anxiety, particularly at the weekends when there's nobody there. You're like, I'm just in charge of the BBC, and you're like, the Queen could die or something. I've got to handle that. And
you weren't on air when that happened, were you?
No,
I can't remember when that was. But
I'll tell you what, I was on air when. So back in Radio Nottingham days, when the Queen mum died.
Right.
So that was like, and that was a similar, abandon all.
So what's the protocol? Are you
shows.
getting trained on this as soon as you join? If this happens, this is what you do.
So no. The answer there. When the Queen Mum died, it's like, well, what do we do? We had the similar thing when the Pope died.
Right.
People tend to die at the weekend on an evening, and that's the Pope died.
Selfish.
And that's when you just tone down. We just kind of let's just tone down the music, and we'll take calls. If people want to share their grief or whatever, it's fine.
Yeah.
But on network radio, it's totally different. Or in recent years, like Six Music, I've done so many sort of rehearsals for different scenarios. This is the protocol. And we're constantly being like, if X should happen, here's the protocol that you can follow. So you really do feel safe.
I remember, I think it was when the Queen died. I'm pretty sure we had an album of the day at 6 at Jalapeno. It was Sam Redwood. And it was like, we were like, yeah, celebrate. And then it was just a selfish Queen ruined it for the rest of us.
There's been a lot of that stuff, it's, I'm reminded of a story from a band in this band from Mansfield, like North Notts. And they were like, if they got into, this is in the 80s, when if you got on top of Pops, like you'd have been famous, right?
Yeah, okay.
It goes from there. And all they had to do was crack the top 40, and that's they're going on top of the Pops.
Yeah.
And I think they made 41, and it never happened. And that's that sliding doors career.
100%. It's insane how, but it's the nature of the beat. There's so many other ways of luck.
Listen, Sam gets enough love. Sam gets plenty of love. He's fine.
He's 6 have been smashing.
He does all right.
Yeah. It's good. He's doing well for us, so it's good. Tell us about a show that you're particularly proud of. Obviously, the Huey Morgan one ongoing, but is there a particular episode or a particular?
There's some standouts.
Yeah, standouts.
Yeah, there are. I mean, the hip hop 50 stuff we did last year, which really resonated with people, and I put a lot of work into that. So that was 5 shows, each one on a different era, different decade of hip hop as it turned 50. Those sort of specials really resonate with people. But I think the one I remember really well was, I think it must have been 2011, and it was 10 years post 9/11.
Right.
And obviously, Huey is a proud New Yorker.
Yeah.
And so we did this New York special. And it was the first time I'd really helmed like a live special on Six Music. And I remember that really resonated with people. So there's so many shows I'm proud of. But there's just certain times where you go, oh,
that's important.
No, this is important, and this is a possibility. And I could, if I hadn't done that New York show, then, and Huey had real skin in the game there. He was really emotionally affected by it. And it showed me that I can do those types of shows, So without we did Hip Hop 40, for instance, and then we did 10 years later we've done Hip Hop 50. Like without doing those, you don't know what you can do. So I'm kind of proud of those.
I guess that's the thing as well. It becomes that's when the skill differentiates from just being a tastemaker. When you actually make something that's more. It's more than just being a selector, like you said before. I think it's like we've got to get the tone right on this.
Tone right and research. It was the New York one, I've got to say, was really like, the tone was really important.
Yeah.
It was a very much we're just going to celebrate New York. It's going to be an upbeat, joyous celebration of this city that's probably had more cultural impact on the music we listen to than any other in the world. London. So that was great. I mean, but I'm proud of I'm proud of a lot. I'm the other side of me is that I sound design and make a lot of documentaries, and I work for a great company called Stack, who make some amazing documentaries, and amazing content around football and other stuff. And some of the documentaries I've worked on with them, and the freedom they give me and the trust to just build these worlds out of sound. I'm super proud, and that's what's sort of in this part of my career. That's what's really been important. This skill as a sound designer that I'm allowed to explore, and a lot of my work is in that world now.
Yeah.
And it's so creatively nourishing. Like if it wouldn't have happened without them.
And you've been getting into your beat making yourself, right?
I mean, so this is where I'm at. This is where I'm at. So I didn't use the word sound designer for a long time. I was just a producer. But nowadays I get sent a lot of stuff that's been produced, and I'm charged with making it sound a certain way and bringing the creativity to it in that way. So I'm comfortable using the term sound designer. But one thing I felt a bit fraudulent about is there's a great sound designer called Pascal Wise.
Right.
And I really look up to him. He does some great work in film and TV. He composes, but he does a podcast that I really love called Cautionary Tales. And the sound design is fantastic, but he's a musician, right? And I was like, I'm fraudulent until I can be a bit more musical. And I can play guitar. Of course I can. Everyone can, right? Yeah. But I was just sort of, okay. It's weird. One of the triggers was there's an artist called James Alexander Bright. I don't know if you know James, but he's a fabulous artist. Play a lot of him on Huey. Tom Ravenscroft plays a lot of his stuff. He's great. And he sent me he was on my podcast, and he sent me a video of someone just using a really cool plugin on Logic and making this soundscape. And as soon as he sent me that, I was like, right,
give this a go.
I've always thought I wish I could have been a beat maker. That's the thing I missed. I didn't realise that could be a job, and how much my life would sort of revolve around beats and stuff. Yeah. But he sent me that video. I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing it. And then, the University of YouTube, and like a year and a bit later or something, like I'm pretty decent with Logic now. Yeah, I've got some musical knowledge. I have composed music for podcasts that have been released. And I'm just kind of developing that. And it's not necessarily about even writing songs. It's just bringing a musicality to your podcast, like, in sound design, knowing how to match keys and create the right drone and the right mood here and there.
I think it's also because I've had similar experiences where I've got one-off bits for agencies recently in sound design work. And I've always had sound design in my head as like, I want to be there throwing cabbages in buckets for a punch sound. It's like, I'm making real Foley. I'm not a sound designer if I'm just doing things in the box kind of thing. I've got to be there with big like field mics and doing all these crazy extravagant stuff, and then realizing that it's true. They're like these recordings that I'm using and messing up inside the box. That is, the modern day sound designer. It doesn't have to be this extravagant thing.
I try and do Foley myself a little bit, because sometimes the right sound just doesn't exist in a library. So, totally. I've got some really nice mics in the studio, and I'll do a bit. The other day, I'm making something. It's in the world of ballet. And so, like, I think was it this week or maybe last week? I've got these really nice cardioid mics that I use in the studio. And I was just doing ballet around the studio, or my version of ballet, just to get that sound. I just needed that specific sound of toes on the wooden floor. Yeah, that's the thing that I felt was missing. And you can find it easily in a ballet class, but it's covered in music. So it's just like my Foley is, I would love to have the big warehouse full of plastic tubs of different toys.
Yeah, that's it.
Bash. Yeah. That's the dream, right? Yeah. I never had that, but Foley where appropriate, I can fill the gaps, I think.
You can obviously, there is sample libraries out there that have got everything you could possibly search for, but there is something where there is time specific tasks as well, where you got to line things up, and you end up having some weird solutions. I remember there was one job I had where essentially I had to give an ostrich, a dodo a noise, and obviously dodos are extinct. Nobody knows what they sound like, so it's like, right, do I go for a pigeon, blah blah blah. And at first I thought, this is an annoying problem, and then I thought, and then actually as the project went on, it became really useful that a dodo didn't have any noise, because suddenly I could give it any noise I wanted and make it really expressive, as long as it stayed consistent with itself and didn't make a dinosaur noise and then a pigeon noise.
That's really interesting.
But it was fun, and just having that became creative. It wasn't just a sound design task where it had to be a certain sound. It could be anything.
Here's the key. Here's the thing, that obviously, like, people, I can talk about sound design all the time. Like, making the sound is one thing. The second, the other thing, the arguably more important thing, is then setting the sound in space, innit? Like, okay, well that's fine, but this dodo lives on an island, and there'll be a distinct type of reverb around this island. Mm-hmm. What does that sound like? I love that.
We're going to have a bit in the podcast where you recommend somebody else in the industry that you think has a good story to tell. It could be anyone from a producer, someone else in radio, a musician. It could be anyone that you think is hopefully achievable. Don't recommend Beyonce, because that's not going to happen.
Well, listen, look, I've mentioned him a couple of times. I really like Pascal Wise. I think he's a mega dude, musician, sound designer, really interesting career.
Right.
Think he's fabulous. I've done an episode of him on my podcast. It was just, learned a lot. Pascal's a really interesting one.
Reflecting on your work, how much do you focus on what you want and what the listener works? When you're compiling a show, how much overlap is there between your personal taste and what you think the listener wants to hear?
That's a great question. Like, I think I have the listener in mind, but I think the thing is, I think there is a kind of weird alchemy, weird formula to doing the Huey Show, for instance. But it's been tried and tested for so long. I couldn't necessarily tell you what it is or put it down on paper for someone else to do. But that probably means I don't need to think about the listener as much.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to think, oh, will a listener like this record? Will I like, because I think I trust myself enough now that I'm kind of like an analog of the listener. Like, if I like it, then I think I've got good ears.
Yeah.
But there is that kind of, what I do think about is how it's put together. Now, what does a listener want to hear, and what is the flow? And also, and there is that occasional like nag, like sometimes I'll want to play something that I think I know a good proportion of the listenership will hate, but that's probably our job too.
Yeah,
and that's fine. You can't please everybody. So it's not like I think what it is. I think within the parameters of what the Huey Show is, thinking about the audience there. So like they expect a certain amount of classics, a certain amount of new stuff, things to happen at a certain time. That's my kind of thinking about the listener, but also I'm also thinking about the non-listener. Like, what's going to turn a non-listener onto us? That's arguably even more important, I guess.
And how true is it that when someone doesn't meet their, say Huey doesn't meet his half an hour for the news break or whatever, how strict are you? Do you actually get a bollocking from upstairs?
So some radio stations have literally like a clock start, and you can imagine like. The news is some radio stations have news that's not just going on their station; it's going on other stations.
Yeah.
So like there's a clock start. When the pips hit, you have to hit it, otherwise there is no news. Six Music's like really chill.
Yeah,
in that sense. So you've got to try and hit it. But if you don't, and it's on the half an hour, and it's just for Six Music. The newsreader can go, okay, fine. Or if you come in early, the thing is you don't want to be doing it like. 30 seconds to a minute is fine. 5 minutes, it just seems like, well, why are we even doing the news now? Yeah. Obviously, because I pre-record, I pre-rec the show, that stuff is never a concern. That's another anxiety I don't have anymore.
Yeah, right? Of course.
So I'm the show to within an inch of its life. But doing it live, and I've gone to news bulletins where the newsreader's not there as well. It happens the reverse. I think something's gone wrong, and communications are broken down. But you are like, I think. Where it would become a big issue, and this is sort of a boring industry thing, is like if you're missing the deadlines for news a lot, or if you're missing the deadlines and that's making the news get shortened, or because there is there is a license agreement that says you've got to have X amount of news across the day.
Right,
like
okay, that's it.
That's your public service commitment. Like so, but it's I've got to say, it's
I guess also you could be if it's just a professionalism thing. You don't want to be stitching the next person up and having 50 minutes between news cycles all of a sudden, and then the next person. And stuff
there's
like
definitely that. But luckily, because they're on half hour, it's not like the junction of your shows. So. The only thing you're doing is like fucking yourself up for the next hour. Like I can't play that track because I've gone late.
Yeah. What's the biggest change that you've seen in the radio game since you've been there? I mean, Spotify, but specific to radio, we're talking like radio pluggers. I'm interested in as well because obviously I've come into that as I've plugged to you before, but this is the first time we've actually had a voice-to-voice conversation.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we've actually. I think it was an Asta Hiroki project a while ago we set up. It was a full mix. It wasn't just a spot play. Yeah. But we never had a chat on the phone. And, that has got to be different. like that's just the world we live in now, right?
I mean, I think in terms of like booking stuff, I probably like that. Probably it's always been done on email.
Really? Okay.
Like just because there's like a trail to it, you know, you don't necessarily need to. But I can't think of a time I picked up the phone to a plugger. But I say that, you know, alongside that, a lot of the pluggers I was emailing, I was in contact with during the week. They were coming around the studio, or I was going to gigs and seeing them and things like that. So I mean, more that I've changed in the industry in that sense. Like I'm in Nottingham, I've got kids. I don't go to a lot of gigs anymore.
Did they used to come into the office though?
Yeah, like just come to the office, you'd be sat there like, you know, it's that weird thing when you're sort of sat down at your computer and then someone next to you is stood up with a load of CDs. So then they look up. But like, again, like to me, young, impressionable me who's just come and never experienced this before, it's like, it's just so cool. Like these people are bringing me records and talking to me and being nice to me. And, you know, and like, it's a great job being a plugger. And I met some good friends who, and you build these relationships, and these relationships are really, really super useful. So I suppose there's a lot of pluggers now that I have got, you know, I couldn't pick them out of a lineup, so I just haven't had to deal.
Well, that's it. How many emails are you getting a day on this? Like, it's insane, right? It's just it's
getting
impossible.
a lot. But at the same time, like, because I'm Huey's producer, like there's certain stuff that I know probably doesn't come to me.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't use a BBC email, so I'm probably restricting myself. There's probably, you know, but there's a lot of pluggers who plug more sort of stuff that's 6 Music daytime that maybe don't
make its way to you.
Don't give me stuff that much. Don't give me the don't think about me. But what I do know is that I think one thing that's changed is like the data that pluggers have got. Like I'm always getting like screenshots of shit. Like I play a track and someone will send me a screenshot of plugger, said, look, you've got 200, you played that 200 Shazams, like after playing it.
Wow,
like,
okay. Yeah.
And that I don't, you know, pluggers tell me that I don't get this on, if my track gets played on this show, it doesn't get that Shazam spike. And someone will send me like a graphic like of this weird thing about active listeners. Someone sent me the other Saturday morning when Huey was on. It's like, and it was like blown away. I played a record and like, look at this audience it's reaching. And so I think maybe like the kind of the sort of data feedbacks been a change.
But again, I guess that goes back to what we were saying earlier about how much do you care about what the listener wants and versus what you like as well. And you're at a point where you're so comfortable, you're not really worried too much about the optics because you're comfortable with the show, you're comfortable with where you're at kind of thing. I guess if you were someone new to the game, you might be like, right, stats nerd, what kind of stuff is getting those Shazams? I'm going to be the best in the game. You know, there'd be
I mean, like you could do a show that way. You know, you could do a show where everything's like designed to just please and stuff.
Totally.
But like, there's no jeopardy in that, and that's not exciting. Like, I don't find live music exciting anymore.
Yeah.
I hate live.
What?
I like live music, right? But a lot of live music, there's no jeopardy to it. It's the same show every night.
Yeah, sure.
It's the same performance. It's always that level of quality.
Yeah.
And I want to go and see a band
that
can have an off night. It can be shit, fuck up, or you know, it just can't connect with the audience. And that's why I love stand-up comedy, because it's got that. It's why I fucking love football. Like, take me to the football. Like, I don't know what performance I'm going to get. So that's exciting.
Who do you support?
I'm Forest fan. Okay,
so you definitely don't know what you're going to get. Like that's
I don't know what I'm going to get. But I mean, like last few years, it's been absolutely excellent. It's been so fun. If there's anything that the Huey Show does, I think like we play things that have these more sort of these vibrations that are a bit more nourishing that connect with people. Like, you know, a lot of the music I like has that kind of sonic quality. You can tell a new record compared to an old record just by the way it's mastered and the way it looks on your screen. Like, it's a big rectangle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you lose something there. And I think I definitely am more drawn to that that music that sort of makes you lean in to listen to it. And I think anything about you know, a lot of the records, a lot of key records, things that shape mine and Huey's taste are records from the 70s, which 70s is probably the best decade for music. Right? I'm just going to say it. It's definitely the best. And that fidelity, like I that's what I'm drawn, that more human even with the timing, the way old records swing out of time a little bit and move, just the stuff.
Well, that was the thing as well. It's like the whole kind of Dilla sound as well. Dilla, that right? Stemmed from a rejection of that. Like, no, fuck quantize. I don't want this anymore.
Quantize, leave the mistakes in. Look, I've got the Dilla book on that shelf. I'm just going through it now. Like, fuck quantize, let it swing.
And that's Dilla's. I think that's the interesting thing when, again, you always have this kind of. It's this kind of theme we were talking about earlier, where the more things get robotized. What word am I looking for?
Yeah, I can't take that.
Yeah, go for it. Like the more people try and find that human input again, and that's where you kind of get. That's happening with curation, and I genuinely, the more conversations I have with people, the more people are looking for human curators to get them outside of that, and I think that happens. There was a wave with that with music when everything was happening with drum machines, and then people were like, "Oh, that's a bit weird how quantized the drum machines are actually." And then it happened. It's this kind of
listen. See what else I find it annoying. Like there's a lot of like AI tools for polishing up audio on like podcasts and stuff, and they've gone too far now. I can actually hear them. I can hear their distinct voice, and that's gone too far. And again, podcasting's kind of. Podcasting is my real passion. That's lost. That everything's now like two people in a nice studio talking to each other. It's just lost some of the. I don't know. I'm hoping for that sort of that response to come into the podcast. So we can make more narrative, more expansive, immersive, cinematic stuff again.
And I think it's interesting as well with podcasting space. Like you said, a lot of things. We say that on a podcast doing on a podcast. Doing this exact same thing.
Done remote via a thing that will squash our audio.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I think it's interesting as well when you do get. I think Adam Buxton does it on his podcast quite well when he intros and outros his podcast. Just
my god,
voice notes with a dog on a dog walk, and just having that different bit of context where. It's not polished. You've got the wind in the background and stuff like that, but it does take you to that. It takes you to where he is in that moment, and I think that's important.
It's immersive, like that's it. You're with, and it's personal. And look, playing with textures is just the thing. Giving things different feels. I tell you a thing I do quite a lot. This is a secret.
Okay, cool. Right? We can cut it.
Listen, I'm all about sounds that nourish your ears, and I'm into a thing called. I don't know if you know what musique concrète is, but musique concrète is basically like a kind of collage approach to sound where you layer sounds from a certain thing together, and they might take on a different form, but they still have that at their heart. They are still of their origins. It's a terrible way of explaining it, right? Basically, it's like putting loads of sounds together and making a little collage and making it really short and tight. But I love that stuff, and I love sounds that nourish your ears, and they tend to be that sort of analogy sound. So I do a lot of podcasts where you might not hear it all the time, but I run vinyl underneath the whole thing.
Oh, for real? Mad.
It's just there. Occasionally you might spot it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll run a cassette hiss under the whole thing. I put a little bit of vinyl crackle in Huey Show sometimes here and there. Just because I think most people won't hear it, but the one who does, or maybe they subconsciously.
Well, that's the thing. It's not. You might not be taking it in, and it's only going to be sound design nerds who'll be able to locate what it is. But it's that.
But hopefully you feel great because you've experienced it. Yeah, you don't know why. Yeah. So I love shit like that.
Where do you see radio going? If you could make a prediction, or the trends that you're already witnessing, what do you think the future of radio is? Is it all doom and gloom, and you think it's going away from it, or?
Nah, I just don't think radio as a medium will die. I just think it's so easy and convenient. And it's changed, and podcasting is a part of it now, and listening to stuff on demand. But look, if vinyl's taught us anything, is that there's look at vinyl now. It is like it's having another heyday. I guess.
Yeah.
I just don't. I think, and also you got to remember about radio. Yeah, so radio might become less important where we are, or might be less important. Although it still seems to be thriving. The worry is that young people won't listen to it, but I think they'll just discover it at their own pace. I hope. But radio also matters in parts of the world where it has to matter. Like there are communities that you can only reach through radio. the world is vast. So, no matter where we are, radio is going to be an important technology.
Yeah.
So, but for us in England or whatever, just, whether we're going to listen to pop music on the radio still, I hope so. I mean, like, I see something beautiful and romantic about it. And if I see that, then hopefully other people will do it. It might come back in a sort of nostalgic, ironic way or something like that. I don't know. But like,
it's interesting to see if the glory days of the pirate radio kind of thing. Maybe that could do a nostalgia trip of and the same way records did. That would be a good way forward. If anyone's listening and fancies doing that.
Listen, obviously it's illegal. Don't do it. But I absolutely love it. It's so formative for a lot of us. Pirate radio. Yeah,
it was also this idea of music scenes as a whole now. People don't really have, or the younger generations don't really have set music genres they listen to. They don't belong to any group of...
No tribal stuff.
Yeah, it's all diverse as hell, and it's just on a song-by-song basis, more or less. But I think what you saw with pirate radio was so formative with local scenes, local music, and real scene making, which is something that I guess is sad to miss, but at the same time I really like how diverse everyone's taste is.
I made a documentary. You mentioned Asta Hiroki, so the person that is Asta Hiroki, I made a doc with him not long back about a pirate radio station in Brighton, and it wasn't even a pirate radio station. It was a station in France that could be picked up in Brighton, and it became widely pirated in Brighton. People were rebroadcasting this station. It became a huge thing. It was FIP. It was FIP. Was the station, and it was really had a big sort of cultural influence on Brighton. So you kind of get into the crux of what kind of story and sound I'm really interested in.
What's the name of it? Give it a plug. Go on.
So I have a show called, this is my own. So I run a company called T-Bone Productions.
Yeah.
So all my freelance work goes through that. But I also have clients, and I have work commissioned by the BBC in places. But one of the things I do, I make my own show for my company called Sounds Good Right, and I'm super proud of it. For the
listener, he's wearing a sick hoodie called Sound Good Right. Get it from wherever.
T-Bone Productions.
There you go.
Get the merch. But I make this thing called Sounds Good Right, and basically it's all those things I'm talking about. It's very nourishing. It's very analog. I've made shows on cassette that I've put out on the feed, but I make documentaries, stories, and interviews that are somehow rooted in sound. So I've made a show where I interviewed one of the first people who tried to map the global hum, that sort of sound that people experience. I spoke to a guy who listens to the sky for UFOs for Harvard University.
Wow.
I made that pirate radio one. Yeah. I made one about the New York Police Department is encrypting its radio traffic. So you used to be able to just listen to it. A journalist would listen to it to find the stories. And that's going to change the fabric of that city. That's getting turned off in December. It's huge. People aren't really talking about it. And then I've interviewed people like Amon Tobin, Egyptian Lover. Actually, they were done by a friend of mine called Ash. Say She have been on the show. But in that, like, I get to do the sound design for it as well. So like, I get to make all, like, so the NYPD show. Like, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make all the music for this one. And it's not perfect, but no commissioner is going to give me that chance to do that. So, and I'm just working on the second series now. I've got an interesting episode about Doom.
Oh yeah.
There's a guy called Shea Fernando Jr. who's just written a book about Doom that comes out in November. I'm going to do an episode on indigenous astronomy and the sound of the Northern Lights.
The sound of the Northern. That sounds mad. Okay.
Yeah, it's been captured. Yeah. It's been proven. It's like indigenous communities have spoken about it for years, for decades. When I say years, I mean like thousands of years. That it has a sound to it, and they've described it. And then there's been scientists who've sort of actually discovered that there is a sort of truth in this, and there's a lot of music inspired by that scientific work. So I'm going to try and pull that all together and make something. I've interviewed Pete from Ishmael Ensemble for an episode. So yeah, that's my and honestly, of all the things I do, that's the thing I really want to elevate. Like I want I keep saying it, I want to make more cinematic, immersive stuff, and I want to push the industry to make that stuff.
Exactly. And it's more, and it's proper storytelling. You've got some really good concepts there that really allows you to play with a world there, rather than it just being, something that could be, if you're going to play with the sound design as well and take people into that space, that sounds like a lot of fun. So I'm going to check that out.
And that's sometimes like the sound design does go over the top. I've got to say, I don't have anyone to tell me to stop. Right?
Yeah.
I think some of the episodes are among the things I'm really like most proud of recently. Like I'm going to do an episode with Huey for the next series as well.
Yeah, nice.
I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we just talked about this morning. With Huey Eyeing. He's got a book coming out soon, which might do it around that. Huey's honestly right. No one knows. Like, Huey's had the most fascinating life. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to share his story. The headline that like he was a kid, he got in trouble, made to join the army, went to the Gulf War, came back, was a bit homeless, kind of, and then some stuff happened, and then he became a rock star.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I mean,
That's insane.
That's a good story, right?
I remember seeing the Fun Loving Criminals classic on TV when the one at Glastonbury, when it's like the crowd is fucking raucous. I'm in that crowd. Are you in it? That's rad. Small world, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm in that crowd. It's Huey and I didn't. I saw when Huey and I first met. Like, that was my thing. I was like, look, I was at Glastonbury. That one. Yeah. And it was. I'm getting goosebumps now. Like, it was
insane,
extraordinary. I mean, I was 18. It was my first Glastonbury. It was the 90s.
I remember having that on DVD, and that was the performance that sticks out on DVD. There's all these headline shows, but for the listener who hasn't seen it, it's basically the other stage about 3 p.m. I think, on some cloudy. This is. It was. Do you know what it was? It's not the other stage. What is it?
It's not. It's the main stage. It's on a Sunday afternoon. I tell you what happened. It's the stage, the pyramid stage. I think I might be wrong.
Yeah.
One year where the pyramid stage sank, so they had to. They had or something fucked up. So it is the main stage.
Oh, right, okay.
It's might be slightly different shape, but it's the main stage. Sunday afternoon, and it's just before the headliners
pissing down.
And the headliners, so I think it was just after Lenny Kravitz and just before Skunk Anansie.
That's it. And the crowd is probably one of the best Glastonbury crowds I've ever fucking seen. I've been to Glastonbury all my life, but I wasn't there, unfortunately. I didn't go to that one. But that one looked fucking insane.
Yeah, it was good, man. And I mean, Huey and I on that same day, unbeknownst to me, he got there early and really soaked it up. He was watching Al Green, and I was watching Al Green. Right, and that was amazing too. That was really good. Really good.
So for someone aspiring to be a radio producer, for someone like Huey Morgan, what would you pass on to somebody who wanted that role and wanted that job? It sounds like you've had a kind of eclectic journey to get to that point, but as you could give some advice, what would you do?
Well, I've been friends with everyone. I think I've been friends with everyone I've worked with, every presenter.
Yeah.
And I think, but you kind of, one thing I always say is you need to be quite pragmatic, because every presenter needs something different from their producer, and you've got to try and be that person. It's like having different friendships. You sort of, you're a different person in different groups. It's that kind of thing. So being pragmatic. I think being a good listener, the main thing I've found about being a radio producer is, you spend a lot of time in a room with someone, and most of the time music is playing.
Yeah.
So what are you talking about? Like, what are you, what does that person need in those sorts of moments? And I guess it's also about, it's just anticipating what people need to get the best performance out of them, allowing them to be shit. They need to be quiet and shit.
Do you ever have a presenter on a bad day?
If you're having a bad day, recognise that presenter's having a bad day. You're not going to magically get them out of it. We'll just play some more music, that kind of thing, really. So I think being a good. I mean, I've also had disastrous moments in my radio career as well, with all sorts of presenters.
Was there anything you wish you learned earlier, or lessons that you had If you could just pass it on to yourself at the start of your career, would you?
Wish I'd stopped doubting myself. I wish I'd just been more confident throughout my whole career.
Yeah.
I just, and I think maybe one thing I've probably not done is, through being freelance most of my career, I've not had the chance to really like. It's why I've started a company. It's why I really want to build a company now, because I've never had that chance to like climb the ladder. I've always been a producer pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, I've never been a senior. No one ever calls me a senior producer, which you probably could. I've never been an exec producer.
Sure.
I've not been headhunted to run like a podcast company, but I've got more skin in the game than people in those sorts of positions. But that's just because of the kind of choices I've made. So I wish I'd learned to make beats earlier, and I wish I'd practiced that. Really do. And I wish I'd been a bit more confident in myself. I wish I'd pitched a lot more ideas of my own.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything we've got time for today. I really appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a good chat. But one last thing is we're going to play out one song of your choosing at the end of the show. Who you shouting out? Or you don't have to shout them out. Just who do you recommend?
Well, listen, I've said it was my favourite album, and I'm banging on about. Well, look, there's too many. You should play Billy Woods, because Billy Woods is a fucking genius, right? Yeah. But I mentioned him earlier. I mentioned American Football. I mentioned it's my favourite album. I am actually going to see him next week. They made like one album in '99 and split up. It became this real cult classic. It's had a second and third life, and then they've since sort of reformed and made new music and stuff, which is great. But yeah, so I'd say let's just play Never Meant by American Football. It's a real sort of slice of late 90s emo, post-hardcore, twinkly, that sort of mathy, twinkly side of that's just brilliant.
Nice one, Tom. What a cool guy. And Tom is, it was good to have Tom on the podcast too. Good joke. Jokes aside, thank you to Tom for coming on. It was really nice to talk to someone that you have so much respect for, career-wise, but is actually an all-round hero, and just really nice guy. Good combination, if you excuse the loving a little bit here, but yeah, Tom's great. Do check out his production company, Sounds Good Right, and he actually did sound design on a podcast that I love. I don't know why I stopped myself from swearing there, but there we go. It's called The English Disease, and it's about football hooliganism in the UK and the stories and the characters behind that. And I'll leave it at that. And I'm sure there's a better description of the podcast itself over on the page, so go listen. Also, check out the Huey Show on Six Music. That is the show that Tom Whalley regularly works on. And yeah, Sounds Good Right. We are How Do I Music. You can find us on socials too. And yeah, at Well Nice Music or at How Do I Music. Did you get that? Cool. See you next time.
How Do I Music, a podcast by Well Nice Music.